I'll never forget the cold that night. It wasn't the usual Halloween chill that brushes your skin like icy fingers. This was a deep, gnawing cold that clung to the air, sinking into my bones. I chalked it up to nerves. After all, the neighborhood was dead quiet, and a strange, heavy fog clung to the ground, swirling around the street lamps like something alive. I was halfway through my usual evening walk, a loop around the neighborhood to clear my head. Just as I turned down Maple Street, the last stretch before my house, I saw him. He stood under a flickering street lamp, tall and dark, his silhouette sharp against the fog. He was dressed in a long, dark coat that hung like a shroud, and his head was tilted just slightly, as though he was studying me. I stopped, heart lurching in my chest. I couldn't make out his face. It was hidden in shadow, but there was something about him that made the hair on my neck stand up, a feeling that whispered, "Run." My rational mind brushed it off. It was Halloween after all. He was probably just a neighbor dressed up for the night, waiting for his friends or messing around. I forced myself to keep walking, eyes trained ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, following my every move. As I passed, I felt an eerie stillness settle over the street, like even the air had stopped moving. My footsteps were the only sound, hollow and too loud. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the path in front of me, but I couldn't resist the urge to glance over my shoulder. He was still there, in the exact same spot, head still cocked, facing me. Only now, he'd stepped forward, just enough to be visible under the street lamp's weak glow. My stomach twisted. His face, what little I could see of it, was gaunt, skin stretched too tight over sharp cheekbones, eyes that glinted darkly under the brim of his hat. I quickened my pace, heartbeat thundering in my chest. I could feel his gaze burning into my back, and a deep sense of dread crept over me, thick as the fog. I glanced back once more, just to be sure, and froze. He was walking toward me, not in a normal way, but in a slow, deliberate march, each step jerky and unnatural, as though he was struggling to hold himself back. I didn't wait to see more. I turned and ran, feet pounding the pavement as fast as they could carry me. My house was just around the corner, and all I could think about was getting to my door, locking myself inside. The street stretched on forever, every shadow clawing out toward me, every crunch of gravel sounding like footsteps behind me. I didn't dare look back again. I couldn't bear to see him getting closer. Finally, I reached my house, lungs burning as I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking. The world felt muffled, like the air itself was holding its breath. I forced the key into the lock, shoved the door open, and stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against it, heart hammering in my chest, and looked through the peephole. The street was empty. I sagged against the door, feeling the tension start to drain from my body. The house was quiet, wrapped in shadows from the Halloween decorations I'd set up earlier. Fake spider webs, plastic skeletons, a dim orange glow from the pumpkin in the hallway. I let out a long, shaky breath, trying to convince myself I was safe. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging sound, somewhere upstairs. My breath hitched, and my eyes shot toward the stairwell. The noise was faint, but unmistakable. A slow, scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Every nerve in my body went rigid. I was alone. I hadn't left a single door unlocked, hadn't opened any windows, and yet the sound was there, creeping down from my bedroom. My first instinct was to call the police, but I realized I'd left my phone in the kitchen. To get it, I'd have to walk toward the stairs, toward that sound. I stood frozen, listening as the dragging noise continued, louder now, closer. It was moving slowly, deliberately, toward the stairs, like whatever was making it wanted me to hear. A faint, raspy breathing accompanied the sound, and my blood turned to ice. I edged backward, heart pounding, and took a step into the hallway. That's when the lights began to flicker, casting twisted shadows across the walls. In the brief flashes, I saw something at the top of the stairs. A tall, dark figure, face hidden in shadow, head tilted, watching me. The figure took a step down. I backed away, hands shaking, and stumbled into the kitchen. My phone lay on the counter, but my fingers felt numb, useless. Another step, closer now. The flickering light cast its form in sharp relief. A face pale and gaunt, eyes dark pits that seemed to pierce right through me. I scrambled for my phone, fingers slipping as I dialed. The figure was halfway down the stairs now, moving in that same jerky, unnatural way, each step slow but relentless. The line connected, and I choked out a plea for help, my voice barely a whisper as I kept my eyes locked on the thing that was now almost at the bottom of the stairs. The last thing I saw before I dropped the phone was its face stretching into a twisted smile, sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. And then, everything went dark. I wasn't supposed to be at the office that night. It was Halloween, and most of the building was deserted, the usual flickering fluorescence casting eerie shadows down empty hallways. I'd planned to leave early, but a last-minute assignment from my boss, a bear of a man with a knack for bad timing, had me chained to my desk. I was the last one there, or so I thought. The hum of the building faded to silence as the night wore on, and I barely noticed when the last of my colleagues had left. The office took on a strange quality, the kind of quiet that makes you second-guess what you're doing, makes you aware of every shift in light and shadow. I felt a chill crawl up my spine and, for the first time, wondered if anyone else was still on the floor. I decided to stretch my legs and head to the kitchen. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the empty hallway, and it was then that I noticed it. The conference room light was on. That was odd. Everyone had gone home, and I knew for a fact that I'd seen that room dark earlier. I peeked inside. A laptop sat open on the conference table, screen aglow with a blinking cursor on an empty document. Strange. No one would leave a laptop open like that, and certainly not in an empty conference room. I stepped inside, and as I got closer, I realized something. The laptop was on, but there was no logo, no brand name, just a plain, gray box and a single line at the top of the screen. "Welcome, stranger." My stomach twisted. Felt like a greeting, but no one was around. I moved closer, my hand hovering over the trackpad, and then another line appeared. "Tell us your name." My breath hitched. A trick? Some tech prank one of my coworkers had set up? I wasn't sure why, but something urged me to type, even as my mind screamed to walk away. I typed my name, watching each letter appear on the screen with an odd, almost eerie clarity. The response was instant. "Nice to meet you. Your name. Shall we begin?" I was already on edge, so I just muttered to myself, "Begin what?" As if it could hear me, the laptop's cursor blinked again. "Look behind you." My skin went cold. I didn't want to look. I knew I'd been alone when I walked in, but now I felt something behind me. A presence so strong it was like the air itself was watching me. Slowly, I turned. The room was empty. I let out a shaky breath, but just as I was about to turn back to the laptop, something caught my eye. On the whiteboard behind me, there were words scrawled in thin, black marker. "Nice to see you too." I was certain it hadn't been there when I'd first entered the room. I stumbled backward, heart racing, and looked back at the laptop. The screen had changed. Now it showed a list of file names. Every single one was named after people I knew in the office, even the ones who had left months ago. My name was at the bottom of the list. The cursor moved on its own again, highlighting the files one by one. My boss's name, then my cubicle neighbor, then the security guard. Each time it clicked on a name, the screen showed a video clip, a short, grainy recording of the person sitting alone in their office, staring at their screen, their faces twisted into expressions I couldn't recognize. They seemed haunted, lost. But it was the final clip that froze me in place. It was a live feed of me, standing in the conference room, staring wide-eyed at the laptop. I backed up, hands trembling. My stomach twisted as I saw myself on the screen, standing alone. Except now, I wasn't alone. In the video, a shadow hovered at my shoulder, dark and featureless, standing close enough to touch. My heart pounded as I turned, looking over my shoulder, but there was nothing. Yet when I looked back at the screen, the shadow was there, standing right behind me, closer now like it was leaning in. The cursor blinked on the laptop, a single question flashing onto the screen. "Will you join us?" I didn't stay to find out. I bolted from the conference room, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. But as I sprinted down the hallway, every door was closed, the whole floor dark. I ran, turning every corner, but somehow, I couldn't find the exit. Finally, I reached what looked like the lobby. Only, it wasn't. The walls were bare, and every window showed the same view. The empty conference room with the laptop still open, casting its sickly glow. The words on the screen had changed again, as though waiting for me to read them. "See you soon." I turned and ran, but as I rounded the corner, I was back where I started, standing in front of the conference room. The light was on, the door slightly ajar, as though inviting me back in. And then, from somewhere in the hallway, I heard it, the quiet click of a keyboard and the sound of someone breathing. I should have listened to my instincts that Halloween night. My friends had dared me to check out the old, abandoned house at the end of our street, the one with the overgrown lawn and boarded-up windows. It had been empty for decades, and the neighborhood kids spun endless stories about it. A haunted family, a curse, a woman in white that wandered the halls at night. I laughed it off, but deep down, I felt a strange chill whenever I walked past it. It was midnight when I crept up to the house alone, flashlight in hand. My friends stayed behind, watching from a distance, ready to claim bragging rights if I bailed. The front door hung slightly ajar, creaking as I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was thick, heavy with dust and something else. A musty, decayed smell that made my skin crawl. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing crumbling wallpaper, rotting furniture, and broken glass scattered across the floor. Everything was silent, too silent, like the house itself was holding its breath. I wandered through the living room, my footsteps echoing on the cracked floorboards. Faded family portraits lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow me, expressions twisted into something almost angry. I shivered, turning away from them and venturing deeper into the house. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging sound from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was just an old house settling, nothing more. But as I listened, the sound grew louder, like something or someone was slowly making its way down the stairs, dragging its feet along each step. I backed away, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The staircase was just beyond the hallway, and I could see the faint outline of a shadow moving down, step by agonizing step. I held my breath, frozen, as the shadow grew closer, and then I saw it. A figure in a long, tattered dress, hair hanging in tangled strands over its face. The figure paused at the bottom of the stairs, lifting its head slightly, and I caught a glimpse of hollow, empty eyes staring back at me. My legs felt like lead, but somehow I managed to turn and run. The front door was just a few feet away, and I reached for the handle, throwing it open. But when I looked back, the figure was standing right behind me, closer than it should have been, eyes wide and empty, mouth twisted into a hollow smile. I stumbled backward, heart racing as I bolted out the door, my friends' laughter turning to shouts as I burst into the night. I didn't stop until I was back at my house, breathless and shaking. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, a Halloween prank gone too far. But when I looked in the mirror, I noticed a handprint on my shoulder. A faint, dusty imprint of a hand, cold as ice, where no one had touched me.